Record. And Zahava, would you like to start us off?
Sure. Hi, my name is Zahava. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a senior at MSU Denver, and I'll be student moderator today. I'm also a peer mentor tutor at TRIO. And as far as introductions, do you want me to read bios or just introduce people from what I've read from their bios? What would you prefer? I guess anyone.
Yeah, maybe, Dr. Tran and Sam, would you like to just introduce yourselves?
Sure, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, I'll go first. So I'm Dr. Sophia Tran. I work in the Department of Chemistry and Biochemistry here at Metro. I'm a faculty lab instructor, so I'm non-tenure track, but full-time and teach our Gen Chem labs. And I got my PhD at the University of Washington in Seattle in 2016 in inorganic chemistry, and then got my job here at Metro and moved halfway across the country to be here. So I think that's it, right? Sam?
Sam Rawha, grew up here in Denver, Colorado, born and raised, went to Denver public schools. Thomas Jefferson, graduated there, went to CU Boulder. Didn't know what I was doing, but ended up graduating with evolutionary biology and microbiology with a minor in leadership. Kind of wandered on in the career field into finance after graduation, unrelated to what I did in undergrad, as most people. And then now I'm at University of Denver doing my MBA, the concentration in finance, and looking to probably find a job that's closely related to working for Wall Street. Nothing fancy. Any questions for us? Just long pauses. Or...
Do you want to introduce yourself too, Zahava, and then you can start with the questions?
Yeah, sure. I guess I can speak a little bit more to my role at Metro. I'm a psychology major, concentration in clinical and counseling psychology, minor in biology. Thinking of pursuing grad school as well, but I can start with a question for both of you. How was the transition to graduate school different from undergrad in terms of courses, how the courses are structured? Like, for example, I've always heard there are less tests in graduate school and more papers. If you could kind of speak to those experiences that you've had.
Sam, I'll let you go first.
All right. So I'm going to speak from the perspective of going from like a hard sciences undergrad to a business graduate program. And I bet Dr. Tran can speak on what graduate hard sciences life is like. So I won't speak on that. Yeah, undergrad was a lot of tests. It was a lot of, one thing undergrad teaches you, I'll put it in perspective, is they're not really, I mean, it's the nicest way. They do or do might not care if you learn anything, but it's more about your discipline is what they're really trying to train you on. Because in the real world, you'll have timelines, you got to be able to work with people. And that's basically a lot of undergrad in our school is kind of like weeding you out to the last minute and kind of making sure you could just basically meet deadlines. Grad school is like night and day kind of. And so like MBA school has been more, there are tests, but they're not like going to make or break your grade. It's been more about like everybody in a business program either is like working together, has a real passion for what they're doing and know what they want to do. Either they already have experience and know they've worked a few jobs or they are working a job while they're in grad school and kind of know like, this is what I really want to do. And to get there, this MBA is like a, you know, a building block for them to get there because it's never going to be a straight path. So for me to use a building block, do I know what's going to happen next? No, but I have a couple ideas of what like the next building blocks are. And the MBA program has kind of taught me like grad school is like, it's really, people actually care, and you're going to take classes that you care about, that you care and want to do. So everyone's it's kind of different to see that from undergrad. And your teachers are a lot more flexible, to be honest. And so they're not like here to weed you out. They're not here to make things purposely difficult. That doesn't mean they're not going to challenge you and want you to learn the most, but it's just a different mentality. It's like people are willing to help, people want to get it done at a high level, and people want to like have a good time while doing it. And so I think grad school is just completely opposite of undergrad. I've loved every second of it.
Yeah, so I would echo the same thing that, you know, you're surrounded by people who have chosen to extend their education for in a particular field, right? And so typically it's people that are very passionate about what they're doing. So I went to, so I majored in chemistry as an undergrad at the University of Washington, and I stayed there for grad school, which is very unusual, but you know, I applied for grad school in a very competitive year. And so I only got in at University of Washington, University of Oregon, visited University of Oregon, didn't like it. So I decided to stay at University of Washington. So the way that most chemistry grad school programs work is you take 1 year of classes and you TA while you take those classes. And those are usually specific to the field within chemistry that you want to study in. So I took inorganic chemistry classes and a couple of organic chemistry classes because I was still deciding between the two. And those classes run kind of like senior level undergrad classes. There are midterms and final exams and all that kind of stuff. You know, off the record, even though this is being recorded, it's one of those things where if you got into grad school, you have to actively try to fail your classes. You know, they've already invested a lot of money and time into bringing you into the program. So as long as you're doing the work and showing effort, you're going to pass those classes, right? And your GPA doesn't matter in grad school unless you plan on applying for fellowships and all that kind of stuff, right? So then you take the 1 year of classes, that feels very similarly to undergrad, but you have to TA while you're doing it. And then after that, the rest of grad school is essentially independent research. And then you have some really major exams that you have to take. They're usually oral presentations in front of a committee where you could potentially fail out of grad school. And so those are kind of the big ones. The classes aren't the big issue. It's these oral examinations where you present your research in front of a committee and you have to defend your work to them. Yeah. So that part, wildly different from undergrad.
Okay, great, thank you. And Rico asked in the comments, what made it a competitive year? Can you explain that?
Yeah, so just from my understanding, there were just a lot of, I think it had a lot to do with the economy too. So like chemistry, STEM grad school, they pay you to go. So I paid like maybe $200 a quarter tuition, and that was just student fees. And I got like $30,000 a year to go to school and TA. And so I think because of the economy at the time that I started grad school, which was 2009, a lot of people were just applying for grad school. And so I was a highly competitive candidate. Like I had a first author paper going into grad school. I had done an REU. I had done a ton of research. I had done like 2 or 3 years of research. My GRE scores were, you know, standardized tests. And so, yeah, I think there were just a lot of people applying for grad school that year. An REU is a research experience for undergrad. So in STEM fields, super important to do it. It's over the summer. Usually it's about, I think mine was like 8 weeks. And they will pay you a stipend for that 8 weeks. I think mine was like $5,000. And then if you can go to a different university and you just it's like full immersion. It feels like grad school because you're just doing research 40 hours a week, working with mentors in the lab. And it's just like really, really good experience to put onto your application for a PhD program in a STEM field.
Kind of piggyback off Dr. Tran. So if you really love something, this is something I know people always are worried about debt and going to school. Like if you know I'm going to do communications for the rest of my life, I'm going to do finance for the rest of my life, whatever it is. If they have a PhD program, typically you can get your master's and your PhD, and typically it's at a very reduced cost. So if you 100% know for sure, like this is what I want to do, no doubt. Obviously, some people aren't down for the PhD because obviously you're going to spend some time writing a big thesis and a project. But if you're someone who's concerned about like taking on the debt of grad school, you should get over that, and you could take that route as an option. And I bet Dr. Tran can kind of attest to that.
Yeah, I think like in my program, I remember we had a huge cohort. That was another reason why I knew it was a competitive year, because I think a normal cohort was maybe 20 students and we had a cohort of 50. And by the end of the first year, a ton of people left the program. And it's nothing to say like how smart they were or anything, because some of them were like literally the smartest people I've ever met in my life. But they just realized, being immersed in all the classes and the research, because you start your research during your first year, like halfway through your first year, they just realized it wasn't for them and they wanted to go do something else. And it's, even though we're getting paid to go to school and it sounds like it's kind of an easy thing, it's just like 5 to 6 years of your life that you're devoting to something that you may or may not even need, right? And at least in the field of chemistry, having a PhD will close some doors for you, in the sense that you're overqualified for a lot of jobs. If I wanted to go work at, I don't even know, like a THC lab or just like some small company as a lab tech, I would never be hired because I'm way overqualified. They know that with a PhD, I expect some level of, or some amount of pay for the amount of education that I have and all that stuff. And they could hire someone for much cheaper that doesn't have a PhD, so it closes doors in that sense, but it also opens a lot of doors, as in like, I can't teach chemistry without a PhD, at a collegiate level, at least. Yeah.
There's another question in the chat, and I think both of you can kind of maybe just speak to this, is how would you recommend that we figure out if we really want/need graduate school?
That was hard. I'm going to take a non-traditional approach. I'm not going to tell you what to do, but I'll tell you the things you should figure out before you go. And so if you, let's say you have a job in mind, I use this as an example. I really hate the business school mindset. Sometimes can be like, I want a 6-figure job. That's a great life. Cool. That's what you want. That's fine. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. I want a big house. I want a nice car, whatever it can be. I want to help my family, whatever your goals are. Got to figure that out first. I would say write that list and then be like, what are your personal goals for your career, your life, and how you want to live that life? Like going to work on Wall Street, I know 100%, like having a family, probably not going to be a possibility. It's like 90 to 100 hours a week. You got to know there's a compromise, like to what you want. And if you want to know if you should go to grad school, what is the job that you want to do and what's going to get you there? So like, I don't have after school, I'm going to apply to jobs, but my basic building blocks, like I want one of these 3 types of jobs. Grad school was going to get me a step in the door. Doesn't mean it's going to get me the job, but I couldn't even apply to those jobs without knowing I need to go to grad school. But I also knew I needed to fill a gap because my undergrad was in hard sciences. They'll respect it, but it doesn't help you get in that door. So I would say figure out the basic building blocks. You don't need to know like, A to B, like you don't have to have a straight line to your path, but if you get some work experience and you're not happy, figure out why you're not happy. And pay is a justifiable reason. Probably where maybe it's not where you're working. Maybe it's, you're not getting that mentorship, that opportunity, but you got to figure out that what it is that you want and then put basic building blocks to your life. It's not always going to be a straight path, but once you have those basic building blocks, you kind of can plan out the next 3 to 5 years and see how to get to where you want to be.
Yeah, in chemistry, I think it's, and any hard science really, it's to start doing the research in undergrad. So find a lab that you find interesting, find a lab that maybe well, you should have some level of interest in the research that you're doing, even if it's not exactly what you want to do. So for instance, when I was an undergrad, actually, this speaks to me being first gen and being a child of immigrants. So my mom didn't work for a lot of the time that I was growing up, but she would clean houses for cash. And she cleaned some dude's house or some couple's house, and they both had PhDs in biochemistry. One worked at Fred Hutchinson Cancer Research Center in Seattle, and the other one worked for UW. And then I started college, and the guy, David, he was like, hey, what's Sophia doing? She's at UW now, like, is she doing research and stuff? And my mom was like, I have no idea. And he reached out to my mom and was like, give her my email address, have her reach out to me, And so without him looking out for my mom, because my mom had been cleaning his house for like probably a decade at that point, he was the one. So then he ended up emailing, or I emailed him, and then he was like, hey, you need to get some research under your belt. I'm in a biochem lab doing stem cell research. You can come work for me for a couple quarters. And that was it was interesting, but it ultimately wasn't what I was excited about. I don't particularly lean towards biochemistry, but it was really, really nice to have 2 quarters where I worked with him and a postdoc in the lab. And I liked being in the lab, even though I didn't like the work itself, right? And then my friend was in a research lab in chemistry. He was switching labs to a different one, and he put in a good word with the professor and was like, hey, Sophia is a good student. You should take her as an undergrad. So then I started working in that lab, which is an inorganic chemistry lab. And that's one that I did like the full 2 years of research in and got my publication in and all that stuff. And yeah, being immersed in the research in a STEM field is really, really important, because that's what you're going to be doing during the PhD program, is doing research the whole time. So that's probably the best way of figuring out in a STEM field, if that's what you want to do.
Something Dr. Tran, regardless of what she says, she pointed out something really important there. There are people, I'll just be honest, we do not get along. I would never hang out with them. I would not probably call them. But as you grow up, one big thing is just have genuine conversations with people, like without asking for anything. And I guarantee you, it always comes back full circle in some way, like indirectly. Like you might be looking for a job. You might be looking and be like, which grad school should I pick? And somebody's like, oh, I used to work there. Like I had a friend that used to work there. It's just like those genuine conversations, relationships you have with people, always just like that first conversation, just keep it between you, like figure out like what they like, what they don't like, find out about their life, and then, try to keep in touch with people the best you can. Obviously it's not easy, but I mean, that obviously worked for STEM, but in business, it definitely, even a fact of life, that definitely comes back. It always helps you. So, but I'll be honest, I'm not going to say it's easy.
Yeah, networking and connections are so important. And I think like stereotypically you would think like business, yeah, sure, you got to be able to talk to people, you got to be able to talk to drywall, make those connections. And I wouldn't think that in STEM, because stereotypically we're very awkward and we don't know how to talk to people and stuff, but it is so important. And I think it came up a lot from my friends as we were finishing grad school and looking for jobs. So not so much getting into grad school. And so this counts even if you aren't interested in going to grad school. The connections help when you're looking for a job, no matter what stage you're at, no matter what your education is, right? And so have those kind of genuine conversations where you're genuinely curious about someone else, because you have no idea if they can help you in any way. And it's not like, that makes it sound like you should only be friends with people so they can do things for you. That's not what I mean, obviously, but like just connections are really, really important. Yeah.
Yeah, I think something else kind of to point out to what you were sharing is the importance of flexibility, of even though you didn't know this is exactly what I want to do, you still actively pursued any kind of opportunity that you thought would better inform your decisions. So I want to point that out, as well as a question specifically for you, Sam, but maybe Dr. Tran, you can speak to this too. Tisha is saying how your undergraduate degree is so different from what you are pursuing now. How did you figure that out for yourself, and what would you recommend others consider who may be in the same position?
All right, so here's the fun and not so fun part. So after after undergrad, I worked 2 years at a lab at a GI clinic in Lakewood. I mean, essentially, with the undergrad hard sciences degree, I'm just going to be honest, you're not going to either be paid well or you have three options. You can apply to grad school, you can go teach, and obviously the biggest one is to apply for medicine. And I don't know. I say this in the nicest possible way. Us as like first chance students or people of color, often your parents will tell you to be a doctor or a lawyer or an engineer. And there's three reasons why. They tell you to do these things because they know those jobs are secure in any country. They know they pay pay pretty well, and that you'll be able to provide for your family and more. And so, but for me, like I've never been the type of kid to check a box and just be like, yeah, I did it. So I took a chance. I met some people, ironically, and talked to them and got a job, my first job in financial services, because I knew I didn't want to teach. I knew I could do medical school. My dad always was a really good math and science guy, and he always taught me those skills, but it didn't make me happy. So I just didn't do it. I was like, I'm not going to do it, which was disappointing to them, but I don't know. The older you get, I know we focus on like community a lot, how we grew up, and it's important to keep that, but you got to have good boundaries, which is always, people think it means like, I don't know, it means like cutting off your community. No, I'm like, I just told them like, it's just not for me. Like I can do it, but that's just not what's going to make me happy at the end of the day. Because on my tombstone is going to be how I live my life, not how I was supposed to, essentially. And that's how I view it. And I'm like, you live in America, which is one of the richest countries in the world. So you can find a way to make money in anything realistically. What that degree of money will be your choice. And that degree of happiness is not related to how much you make. I always point that out. I know doctors make a lot of money, but ironically, when I got my first job, I worked with a ton of doctors and they all lived in Highlands Ranch and they all hated it. They all got stuck. They're like, I have a ton of grad school debt. All my money's wrapped up in grad school debt in my house and my car. How can you help me as my financial advisor? I was like, not much. It looks like not until you're about 55 and you're free of that debt. So, so the things I would say is that's honestly, I just had to make that list. And I was like, I know I don't want to do these three things. After 2 years, I was like, what do I do? And, I just always talk to people randomly. And it's kind of weird how that came back. And I got that first job through a guy I met, accidentally spilled something on him, but it's a whole funny story. And then I felt really bad. It was an accident, but then we kept talking and then he's like, come take this first job with me. And I did. And it was from there, I knew, I was like, finance is it. Like, I just knew, like the first week, I just had this feeling. I was like, I could clock in, it didn't bother me for hours, just keep doing it. I don't know. It just kind of clicked for me. And I was like, I know finance is what I'm going to do. And then, trying to figure out what next steps are after a few years is again, make that list, know what those building blocks are, because it's not going to be A to B. It's probably going to be like A to H. You might go back to C. Like, it's just you gotta have those basic building blocks and keep it as simple as possible, because if you're checking it off like year by year, month by month, it's probably not going to go the way you want it. And so by saying like grad school is a building block to get that next job or to get that next opportunity, that's how I view it. If I get there, I do exactly what I say I think I want to do. Maybe it'll work out, maybe it won't, but mainly just got to make that list and decide what's important to you, what's important maybe to you and your family, maybe what's important to your significant other. But at the end of the day, you're going to be the one going to this place or working for them. So you got to make sure like that list is, those first 3 points are for you. And then, 4 and 5 can be family, close family and friends.
Thank you. That was really informative. Something that I noticed is you both shared your first generation students and you've both gone to grad school. And I was curious if you feel comfortable sharing more about those experiences for you both.
Do you want to go first, Sam?
No, because I talk too much. So I'll let you go first.
Perfect, because I talk too much too. Yeah, I mean, so my parents are immigrants from, I'm Chinese, but they came from Vietnam. And, very much the American dream of, what education is the key to everything. Whether or not that is still true in 2021 is a different discussion for a different panel. But, my parents still believe in that. And they think as long as I was good at school and I got good grades and everything, that I would be able to achieve anything. And so, yeah, they pushed me to be as academically inclined as possible, which I think is really interesting because um, I they don't really know anything about the American education system. And so it was kind of like the blind leading the blind. They were just like, keep going to school, keep getting those A's, right? But there was no steps of like, this is the college that you should go to. These are the things that you should do before entering college. These are the things that you should do in college and stuff like that. And they just kind of relied on me because they knew that I was like academically inclined to be able to figure out these things on my own, right? So like, but that's kind of unfair, not unfair for my parents, but in the sense of like, if I don't know something exists, I can't ask questions about it, right? And so just by chance, I learned about the GRE, which is like the SATs to get into grad school, right? During my second year of college. And then that's when I realized what grad school was and what research was, and that this was a possible next step for me and what that would mean for my career and all that kind of stuff. And that was not because of my parents, because again, like I wouldn't expect my parents to know that they work blue collar jobs, right? And so that for me was pretty frustrating in undergrad because a lot of my friends were kids of doctors or whatever, people that went to college, right? And so their parents could help them navigate the system, which I felt I was at a great disadvantage because of that, especially because I was in such a competitive field like chemistry. Whereas, I look at my best friend whose parents did not go to college either. She got her degree in sociology. It's a little bit more chill, all that kind of stuff. She didn't have to fight to schedule her classes and her labs and all of these things in undergrad. And she just kind of went through and it was great. And, yeah. And our experiences were very different in that way because at University of Washington, all the undergrads are essentially pre-med. So everyone's fighting to get an A, and they set the curve for the class and this and that. And it just makes it really, really hard for someone who wasn't pre-med. And I was just there because I liked the chemistry, but I have to take all the same classes as these other super competitive pre-med kids. And they're just kind of like, everyone's just trying to one up the other person. And it was very isolating in that sense of, okay, well, I don't have rich parents. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't live on campus. I commuted, it was just like my experience was very different than I think a regular student at the University of Washington because it's not a commuter campus like Metro. Yeah, so the GRE is, I don't know what GRE stands for. Graduate something exam?
Graduate record examination.
Record. Okay. Yeah. It's just it's just like the SATs that you would take the SATs to get into college, but it's standardized tests that you take to get into grad school. So I do know that a lot of grad school programs are now saying that they don't care about the GRE score. So it's a general exam where there's a math and like a English or writing score. And then some programs ask for a subject specific GRE exam. So some of the schools that I applied to asked for a chemistry GRE. So that's a completely separate test. Both of them cost about, I don't know, back then it was probably like $100 or $200 per exam. So I'm guessing it's about the same. So yeah, and then those scores get sent to the schools that you're applying to. They're terrible. But again, I think a lot of programs are moving away from that because I think there's a lot of research showing that standardized exams aren't the best measure of intellect or ability, Yeah. Sam, hit it.
So grad school is interesting at the University of Denver. I'm doing a part-time MBA, so our classes are at night and everyone still kind of has a job. So it's like a different grind. So I can only speak from the perspective of an MBA student, and mostly everyone's still working. So I want to keep that kind of clear because I can't speak for everyone. Uh, my experience has been great. I mean, because I grew up in a single family home. My dad was always working. High expectations. Not saying there wasn't any support, but obviously you kind of just have to grow up fast. So for me, it's kind of like you got to have that dog mentality. Like I don't really, I mean, I didn't really expect a handout. I didn't expect it to be easy. I definitely know you need to know when that yourself well enough to know when you need to ask for help. That's kind of like big in grad school. Like Dr. Tran said, like they're not trying to fail you, but obviously most people are working a full-time job. If you like slip on a week, it can be rough to kind of build back up. But it's, we have a great support network. Rico knows all of us kind of help each other. So it's important to build the relationships with the people in your classes and your professors and to just be honest with them. Like one of the greatest things I've discovered was I email my teacher and be like, hey, I can't turn in this assignment on this day. XYZ, I'm working. They'll be like, when can you turn it in? Or I won't start grading it till next Tuesday. And they'll be like, turn it in by next Tuesday and you're cool. And that's been just being honest with them and letting them know that has been the greatest experience. Sitting in class, as Rico well knows, I like to compete. I will, I like to challenge people's ideologies. I like to maybe push buttons in a way, but all in a positive kind of direction, kind of like get the conversation going to really have to see what people know and see like, what am I biased on? What do I do not believe in? What do I need to, read up on to make sure I'm clear and what my beliefs are? Because that's something in grad school you'll kind of find is like your little niche and be like, you'll know like in the first semester or maybe the first 2 quarters if you're in a quarter system, like this is for me. Like you'll know right away because I wouldn't just go to grad school to check a box. I know a lot of people kind of can do that, and Dr. Tran spoke to that because often, like when there's a recession, like we just saw in COVID, there's a recession. Grad school applications are the biggest year usually the year following, and that's because either people have lost jobs or realized like this job is not enough to survive in downturn times, so they got to find a way to kind of move up the ladder, and that's fine. But grad school is gonna be, I hate this phrase, it's gonna be what you make it, and so your teachers are always, they know, like I said, it's not a weed out mentality. It's not to make it difficult. They're actually going to be there to help you, and I like in a very genuine way. So it's been great for me. But I've been in the same class, the same 13 people, so I never feel like I can, even people I adamantly disagree with, and we do not have the same beliefs. So one of them, he's no longer in the program, but he's still one of my best friends. Like political ideology, religious beliefs, 2 ends of different spectrums. Like we are the best of friends. It's just not, those aren't, for me, you should look at things that make you different. It's not like a deal breaker. You kind of just be like, you can find common ground with anybody. So grad school's been really fun for me, and I love every second of it. Not saying it's not hard, but I knew I was supposed to be here, so I enjoyed everything about it.
I just want to add on to that like grad school is not easy. It was literally the hardest 6 years of my life. I still process the trauma of grad school to this day, okay? But I had so much fun and I would do it all over again because of the people that I was with, the bonds, like especially in a STEM field where like you're in the lab all the time, like 60 hours a week. These are your people. This is your community that you're going to build. I don't know if it's the same for Sam, because y'all are in classes and stuff, but it sounds like you're with the same 13 people, yeah, I would do it again in a heartbeat. Absolutely. No matter how traumatic it was. So
And to answer the question I just saw, besides Rico, who is in my class, I would have been the only person of color. A lot of grad schools and a lot of graduate programs are going to be predominantly white universities, master's programs, and not saying you should get over it or say that's what it is or what it is, but it's changing, but that just takes time. So unfortunately, like there are certain aspects of it. You got to be, I don't know, administration kind of super formal, expectations of like calling them, by their titles, my professors don't care in business school. They say you can call them by their first name. So always, I would say tier on the, until they correct you, I'd say tier on the formality point of introducing them by their titles, their names, and then 2 seconds later, it's like, yeah, you could just call me XYZ and it's all good. Uh, DU, since everyone's working, it's working class people. So it's like, I don't have the same, like, undergrad. I definitely caught the feel that I was like not in the same socioeconomic class, no matter where I went in CU Boulder. And that's clearly evident. Like, not in the same socioeconomic status, like, and not even in the same, like, areas of the world where United States, which felt like where they're from, are foreign worlds. But graduate school, different. I would say those types of kids definitely wouldn't be going to graduate school. These are all people who genuinely want to improve their life in many different ways, and I don't know, really enjoy what they're doing, and that's where I think you can always find common ground, even for people you think you might not like. Or we all have our biases. You make a first judgment when you see somebody. What's your second thought? It's my opinion. Until you know that person, you shouldn't have that second thought, and then make your decision from there. But it's the same there. I mean, it's you're always gonna be like either a woman or a person of color wherever you go, but I'm not gonna be someone's check the box essentially for that. Like when I apply to a company, I'm like, I'm not gonna fill your minority quota, and if I catch that field, I'm out. I mean, like, no amount of money, in my opinion, is gonna make me feel good about that. So they can pay me whatever they want. They can try to entice me with whatever they have. I'm just never gonna be that. And you, as people of color, women, you can tell. I just want to be honest. I don't know how to explain it, but you can just catch that vibe and be like, I know what this is, and you have to make a decision with yourself. If you're cool with it, go ahead. And some people are. I know a few of my friends have used it to make giant leap stones, and I'm just not going to be that person for them. But it's the same, and I've never caught that vibe with any of my professors yet. I got 2 classes left, but at this point, it should be cool.
Yeah, so okay, just to speak to that, it's really interesting that you say that, Sam, because I have 2 different stories. So I met someone in grad school who is of Colombian descent but presents as very white, and she was applying for professorships at bigger research institutions, and I think she got an interview at one of the California schools, one of the big California schools, and she immediately picked up, because at dinner they were like, oh, so you're Colombian, right? They just needed to make sure that she was. And immediately she was like, I'm out. Like, I'm not taking this job, even if and professorships are hard to come by, right? But she took a stance and she was like, no way am I going to come here if they offer me a job. Whereas I have another friend who is not in chemistry, but he is half Mexican and also presents as very white. And he just uses that to his advantage, like, all the time, right? And there's no judgment on either end of the spectrum, but it is very interesting how people treat those things very differently, and that's a very personal thing that you don't need to justify to anyone. Okay. Yeah, so for me, as a first-gen student and a student of color, so this is a story that I often tell when I talk about race in my life, that since I grew up in Seattle, I really truly never felt like a minority until I moved to Denver, because there's a huge Asian population. And also being in a field like STEM where Southeast Asians are very prevalent, it's also just kind of like not an issue, right? That being said, when I got into my PhD program, there were not a lot of Asian people in the program, but I think I was just so used to being around white people my whole life that it wasn't a big deal either, and UW has a very, very large Asian population, even if it wasn't in the chemistry grad program. So I was just constantly surrounded by Asian people. As a woman, I was very lucky in grad school. All of my peers were very respectful. I never had any sexism issues in grad school. Recognize how lucky I was, because a lot of my friends have told terrible stories of what they have had to go through during grad school. I would say the biggest issues happened when I started my job, and it's completely independent of Metro. It has nothing to do with Metro specifically. So Denver doesn't have a large Asian population, so I felt like a minority for the first time in my life. there is a lot of research out there showing the different dynamics of how students treat their male versus their female professors. And that was something that I definitely felt for the first time as, you know, the professor in the room. And I would say that for me, my age was probably the bigger issue because I look very young. I am the youngest faculty member in the department. And, you know, because Metro has a bit of a non-traditional student body with older students, that was always more of the issue from students and from some of my peers who are much older than me that didn't really trust me to be able to do my job, I guess, you know? So I think the age thing is an issue, especially because I present as much younger than I actually am. Like I look younger and I act younger than I am. But also that's one of those lessons that I learned where it's like, I don't care. I'm not going to try to act more professional or more mature just to appease anyone. I know I'm professional and I know that the way that I talk helps students relate to me, right? So I'm not going to change that. I'm not going to change my personality to try to fit in to this ivory tower, you know? So yeah. So my experience has been kind of like up and down, I guess.
Great, thank you. There's another question in the chat. Someone is saying that their sister is a STEM student who's going into nursing. She's very interested in going to graduate school. What is advising like for graduate school?
So I think your sister would be entering a nursing program specifically. And so I think she just has to, I don't know what nursing school is like, to be completely honest. I know it's wildly different than like each kind of field. If you go into nursing school versus physical therapy school versus a PhD program, med school, etc. They're all wildly different, you know? So I would just suggest that your sister try to find, you know, maybe go job shadow someone who is in nursing and see if they can help with pointing her in the right direction as far as what to do. Yeah.
And it's also going to really depend on the school you go to. I mean, and the size of the program. So like nursing, it's not a it's a bigger of a program in general at most places, but I do say grad schools usually for every program do have dedicated advisors specifically for that program. And so finding them is not hard. Trust me, they're going to make sure you know who they are. I mean, you'll get bombarded with emails probably every day or every other day at your new university email address. So for me, we got 2 advisors, and I mean, at a drop of a dime, Monday through Friday, or even the weekend, they'll let me call them personally on their cell phone numbers, or if I can wait till the weekday, I can schedule a Zoom or come. Well, I was able to come into the office, but you know, whatever works for me, they'll make it work. And like sometimes email, if it's like super lengthy, I'm just like, let's just talk it out because I'm not, you know, things get lost in translation. It's just easier to kind of just talk it out. But in grad school, I'll definitely say where you go, you'll have dedicated advisors to your program if it's a traditional setting, but I can't guarantee it. Obviously, it's really in the scope of what I know, but it's just going to depend on where you go. But usually they have at least 1 or 2 for your program.
I'm reading Seeley's question. I hope I'm saying your name correctly. So licensure programs are usually like easier than a full-blown grad program, at least the licensure programs that I know about. And they are very different things from my experience. So licensure programs, you take a specific set of classes and then take your examination exam, whereas for, you know, STEM grad school, it's like you're doing research for a number of years. And so it's very likely that after you were to finish a PhD program, you probably wouldn't do a licensure program for anything, unless it was very niche. But I think with a PhD, you know, the thing that I always say to people is my PhD is in inorganic chemistry, but ultimately it's a fancy piece of paper that tells people that I'm an expert problem solver. You know, like I can jump into nearly any field, and the PhD shows people I know how to teach myself something, and I know how to problem solve no matter what the issue is. And I think a lot of, especially STEM PhD folks, will say the same thing about their degree, you know, because I have a lot of friends that will jump kind of fields. They're still in chemistry, but you know, they won't exactly work in what they did their PhD in, right? And that's because we have been trained for 6 years to problem solve and teach ourselves new things. And so that's why sometimes I think like the licensure program isn't 100% necessary for a PhD, because you're already showing that you can problem solve and teach yourself. But I might be wrong.
I could speak to this to my girlfriend who did her master's in licensed practical counseling in a different state, and then got registered or licensed here in the state of Colorado. So every state has an exam you have to take. Obviously, it's kind of, licensures are tough because every state might have like their own little spin on it, their own little extra requirement on it. And so it's kind of like, that's where that building block and that list comes in. Like, if you really want to know, you want to live in Cali, that's cool. I like Cali too. You know, you want to live in Texas, Florida, whatever it may be, North Carolina. If you kind of have that in your building block, then you kind of need to know, like, if I go to grad school, let's say in Washington, but I'm gonna look at the licensure requirements in North Carolina. You got to keep checking that up, because if that's where you want to live and that's when you want to get registered, that's where that comes into that kind of like 3-year plan. It's doable. Like, no school is going to be like, if it's a legitimate accredited institution, doesn't matter what state you go to, you're just going to have to take a slightly different, you know, licensure test or modification of that to go to that state. And so as long as it's an accredited graduate school, you should be fine. No concerns there. You can really live your life how you want. No one's ever going to be able to take that piece of paper away from you. But like I said, it's the same thing. It just, graduate degree says now I know what I'm doing and I can do it at a higher level and than an undergrad student. And I'm dedicated to doing this for the rest of my life and seeing where it takes me.
I also want to add on to that idea of building blocks. So I was talking to a student recently, and she was unsure if she wanted to go to grad school or not. And she was just kind of all over the place. And so I told her to look for, because ultimately, you know, things change. I went to grad school. I finished grad school 5 years ago, right? And so things have changed. I haven't looked for a job for 5 years. I was like, hey, you should just like go to indeed.com or whatever, you know, job search website, and start looking for jobs that sound interesting to you, and look at what their qualifications are. See if they require a master's or a PhD or whatever, right? Because I think, you know, I talked about how grad school was traumatic for me. There was a lot of days, and when I say a lot, I mean a lot of days, that I would wake up and just say to myself, I'm leaving grad school. Like, I don't want to do this anymore. Why am I doing this? You know? And it wasn't until I realized, you know, I had a moment where I was like, wait, I want to teach. And in order to teach, I need a PhD. So you just got to stick it out. You know, you're not going to do research for the rest of your life. You just need this PhD so that you can go teach and do what you want, right? And I think that understanding what your foundation and your building blocks are, like Sam's talking about, helps keep your eye on the prize, right? You know why you're doing something versus just doing the motions because you thought your parents wanted you to do this, or it was the next logical step or whatever, right? You really have to have that purpose in mind to keep you motivated.
You just jotted my memory. So I know people are like, I'm an introvert, extrovert. You know, doesn't mean you can't be social or outgoing. It just means you need more time to recover. By definition, I'd be an introvert, but you drop me in a room, I'll probably make friends with everybody, but I probably won't talk to people for the next 3 hours after that, just being honest. But I won't say undergrad. I would say, I guess traumatic is a good way to, like, you never see Boulder makes you kind of feel like you're not supposed to be there the whole time. And they feel it everywhere you go. And so, but I don't know. After that, I realized I was like, yo, there's a lot of things I left on the table because I just wanted to get out as fast as possible. And there were all, I won't say that there were bad people, but there were definitely people willing to help me. I just wasn't in the right mindset to take those opportunities or to talk to them. I just wanted to get out. So when I went to grad school, my mindset was, doesn't matter what this environment is, I'm gonna make the best of this for me. And so I'm gonna say, I'm not gonna lie and say it's not gonna be easy, but like in any situation, people always think they only have two options if it's really down to the wire. And I'm like, if you take a second, you take a deep breath, you breathe in, breathe out for 30 seconds and think about it, there's no such thing as a one or two option situation in life. You just have to calm yourself and think about, like, I'm at a grad school I hate. It's in the middle of nowhere with a bunch of rich kids or a bunch of people just here to check a box to go to get this job they want. Am I going to have that same mentality? Am I going to let it rub off on me? That's a certain level of maturity you should have by the time you get to grad school, because that doesn't mean I can't be friends with these people and have conversations and enjoy their presence in certain aspects. But for me, you got to figure out what that value piece is. And once you know you have that value piece and the focus and the building blocks, doesn't matter where you are. You know what you want. You know what you want to do. You know how this is going to help you get there. You could be in the worst situation possible, and you will find it, like, it feels like it just kind of slides off me, because now I'm just like, I know what I want. This is the one way to help me get there, and I'm gonna make the best of the situation for me. And I'm not gonna say it doesn't wear on you. It's kind of mentally draining, because I've had other friends who are in grad school. It's not there. They don't have that mentality. I'm like, yo, you loved it when you're about to start, and now you hate it, and now you're questioning everything past that. So I'm just like, it is draining, but it's a way to, kind of keep those blinders on and remember why you're here and what you want.
Okay, well, great. I do really like the comment. Okay, I think I'm saying this right. Sally, I don't know. I'm so sorry. Is that she said, they said, this is the biggest takeaway is learn about yourself and your wants and go from there. And it seems like everyone in the comments is really agreeing with that. So I think that's a great takeaway from this, especially with our last few moments. I don't know if anyone else has any last questions or if our speakers would like to share any last thoughts. But thank you. I've learned a lot already.
I'll say one last thing. Yourself probably going to change. As weird as this sounds, every like 3 to 5 years. Like, you might not want the same things, or you might want to, you're not redefining who you are, but the kind of like a Rubik's Cube where you're trying to align all the colors, it just changes on you, and you'll like realize, you're like, oh, these things aren't as important to me anymore, or I don't really enjoy this as much anymore. And then you're going to have to find, how to get it back to the same color where you're just in line. So it's kind of like, it isn't a perfect end game. It's never going to be perfect, but I definitely feel like after you graduate, things are going to change, and yourself, most importantly, is going to change a lot every few years and more than you think. And it's going to be a little uncomfortable. It's not going to be easy, but just kind of, you got to find something, like, you got to keep turning it. It might take a few years, but you'll like understand like who you were before in high school, in undergrad, who you were in your mid-20s, late 20s, early 30s, mid-30s. You're not going to be the same person, but you'll maybe have the same values, if that makes any sense. You'll understand.
Oh, go ahead. Were you going to say something? No? Okay. Well, I just wanted to say thank you so much to Dr. Tran and to Sam. Lots of wisdom shared upon us all today. So if you all want, you can put in the chat a quick thank you, and you can also use the little smiley face to either clap or do a little party emoji, anything you want to do to celebrate and to say thank you. But we really appreciate you both. I think this really, really helps. And as you talked about, it can be hard out there as a first-gen student, not really knowing how to navigate graduate school. So I think that this is really, really helpful for our students. And Zahava, thank you so much for being our moderator. You did a great job. So I'm going to clap for you too. Thank you. Well, with that, we'll go. Oh, go ahead.
Nope, I was just saying thanks, everyone.
Yeah. Thank you all. And feel free to go ahead and log off. If you need anything, I'll stay on for a couple more minutes.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.